She slammed the door shut, gasping for air, then the locks clicked. The tattooed driver didn't ask where she was going, only who had done that to her. When she whispered, "My husband," he looked in the mirror and said, "Take me to him." And that's when she realized escape wasn't the end, it was the beginning. If this story pulled you in, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. I've got another unforgettable story dropping tomorrow. And while you're here, jump into the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our community from all around the world. Alright, let's get back into it. Rose Lane got into the wrong car at 2:34 a.m. on a Tuesday night in October, barefoot, wearing a champagne-colored dress that had cost Evan $3,000 in heels. She'd left somewhere between the bathroom window and the street. In exactly 7 minutes, she would realize the driver wasn't her rideshare. In exactly 30 minutes, she would understand that the tattooed stranger behind the wheel was far more dangerous than the man she was running from. In exactly 2 hours, she would be sitting in a penthouse she didn't recognize, watching a Mafia boss make phone calls that would dismantle her husband's entire life. But she didn't know any of that yet. Right now, Rose was just trying to breathe without her ribs screaming in protest, trying to stop shaking long enough to pull the door closed, trying not to think about what Evan would do when he got out of the shower and found the bathroom empty, the window open, his wife gone. The rain hammered against the car's roof as she collapsed into the back seat, gasping. Her wet hair clung to her face. Mascara burned her eyes. Every breath tasted like copper and fear. Where to? The driver's voice came low and controlled the kind of calm that belonged to men who didn't need to raise their voices to be heard. Rose's throat closed. She hadn't thought past escape, hadn't planned for after. She swallowed hard, tasting blood from where she'd bitten her lip during the climb down. I don't know. I need to disappear. The words came out broken, fractured, like her. She expected the driver to kick her out, to tell her he wasn't a charity service, to demand an actual address or leave her on the curb where she belonged. Instead, he shifted in his seat, and for the first time, Rose actually looked at him. The image would burn itself into her memory, tattooed hands gripping the steering wheel, ink crawling up from his knuckles and disappearing beneath the cuffs of an expensive gray suit. Dark hair, sharp jawline, a face carved from angles and shadows, and eyes cold, unreadable, the color of obsidian that found hers in the rearview mirror. He studied her for a long moment, saw the mascara streak down her face, the bruise blooming along her jawline, purple-black against pale skin, the way her hands trembled in her lap even though she was trying desperately to hold them still. He didn't ask if she was okay, didn't offer empty comfort or useless questions. Instead, Ricardo Ortiz, though Rose wouldn't learn his name for another 11 minutes, did something she didn't expect. He locked the doors. The sound made her flinch, sharp, final. "Who did this to you?" Rose's chest tightened. 3 years of pretending the answer didn't matter came crashing down around her. "My husband," she whispered. The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then Ricardo turned off the meter she only just noticed wasn't running, checked his mirrors with the precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime watching for threats, and spoke the words that would change everything. "Take me to him." Rose should have said no. Should have demanded he let her out. Should have recognized the danger sitting 2 feet away from her, all tattooed knuckles, cold calculation, and a suit that probably cost more than her wedding ring. But she'd spent 3 years married to Evan Lane, a man who weaponized smiles and wore violence like cufflinks, hidden until it was too late. She knew what danger looked like when it pretended to be safe. This man wasn't pretending to be anything, and somehow, that made all the difference. "You don't understand," Rose said, her voice barely audible over the rain. "He's not. You can't just address. Not a question, a command." Rose's hands twisted in her lap, nails digging into her palms. She thought about Evan's face when he was angry, the way it went perfectly blank before the first shove, the way he'd grip her wrist just hard enough to bruise while smiling at dinner guests, the way he'd locked her in the bedroom last week for talking to the mailman too long. She thought about the bathroom door she'd wedged shut with a chair, the window she'd forced open with shaking hands, the 12-story drop she'd considered for exactly 3 seconds before choosing the balcony ledge instead. She thought about going back, and then she gave Ricardo the address. Park Avenue, the residences, penthouse level. Something flickered across Ricardo's face, recognition. Maybe, or calculation, but it vanished before Rose could identify it. He pulled into traffic without another word. The city blurred past the rain-streaked windows. Neon signs, empty streets, the kind of Manhattan silence that only existed in the dead hours between night and morning. Rose pressed herself against the leather seat, watching the tattooed stranger drive. His hands never left 10 and 2. His eyes never stopped moving mirrors, windshield, mirrors again, like he was expecting someone to follow them, or expecting to be ambushed. "What's your name?" Rose asked finally, because the silence was crushing her and she needed to know who she'd just trusted with her life. "Ricardo." No last name. No explanation. "I'm Rose." He didn't respond, but his eyes found hers again in the mirror, held them for a beat too long. "Your husband," Ricardo said, his voice cutting through the rain's rhythm. "What does he do?" He works in finance, acquisitions and—" Rose stopped, frowned. "Why does that matter?" Ricardo's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Evan Lane." It wasn't a question. Rose's blood went cold. "How do you know his name?" "I know a lot of names." Ricardo turned onto Park Avenue, the towers rising like sentinels around them. "Evan Lane's has been crossing my desk for 6 months. I don't understand." "You will." The car slowed as they approached. The residence's 40 stories of glass and steel and old money. Rose's prison. Her gilded cage. Ricardo pulled to the curb but didn't shut off the engine. Instead, he turned in his seat, facing her fully for the first time. Up close, he was terrifying. Tattoos snaked up his neck, disappearing into his collar. A scar cut through his left eyebrow. His eyes were the darkest thing Rose had ever seen. Not cruel, but absolutely empty of hesitation. "Listen carefully," Ricardo said. "I'm going to ask you one more time and I need the truth. Did he just hit you? Or is there more?" Rose's breath hitched. "What do you mean, more? Does he have people? Connections? Is he just a man with bad habits, or is he useful to someone?" The question made no sense. But the way Ricardo asked it, cold, clinical, like he was assessing an investment, made Rose's skin crawl. "He has meetings," she said slowly. "Late nights. People who don't give names. Cash that doesn't go through banks. I'm not supposed to know about any of it, but you see things." Rose nodded. Ricardo studied her for another long moment. Then he reached into his jacket. Rose flinched and pulled out a phone. "Stay here," he said. "Doors stay locked. Someone approaches the car. You scream." "Understood. Wait, what are you going to do?" Ricardo's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "I'm going to have a conversation with your husband." Then he stepped out into the rain, and Rose watched him disappear into the building like a shadow swallowing light. Rose counted every second Ricardo was gone. 143 seconds before the building's glass doors swung shut behind him. 206 seconds before her hand stopped shaking enough to uncurl from the seat leather. 417 seconds before she realized she was holding her breath. The rain continued its assault on the car's roof, each drop a miniature explosion in the suffocating silence. Rose pressed her forehead against the cool window, watching the building's entrance like it might swallow her whole. What had she done? She'd given a complete stranger, a man with tattoos crawling up his neck and eyes that could freeze blood, her husband's address. She'd watched him walk into that building with the kind of purpose that promised violence. And the worst part? She hoped he delivered it. The thought should have horrified her. Should have sent her scrambling for the door locks, running back into the rain. Back to the woman she'd been 3 hours ago, when the biggest decision of her night was whether to take another sleeping pill or risk staying awake while Evan slept beside her. But that woman was gone. That woman had climbed out a bathroom window and fallen 12 feet onto a balcony in a $3,000 dress. That woman had gotten into a stranger's car and said, "I need to disappear." This woman, whoever she was becoming in the back seat of Ricardo's car, wanted to watch Evan's perfect world crack. The driver's side door opened at exactly 9 minutes and 42 seconds. Ricardo slid behind the wheel, water streaming from his suit jacket, his hair plastered dark against his skull. He said nothing, just put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb with the same controlled precision he'd shown before. But something had changed. Rose saw it in the set of his jaw. The way his tattooed knuckles had gone white on the steering wheel. The muscle jumping in his cheek like he was grinding his teeth behind that impassive mask. "What happened?" Rose asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your husband wasn't home." Relief and disappointment crashed through her in equal measure. "Oh, but his security was..." Rose's stomach dropped. "His what?" "2 men, private contractors." Ricardo's eyes found hers in the mirror, and for the first time, she saw something almost like amusement buried in all that ice. "Former military, good equipment, terrible instincts. You didn't hurt them?" Ricardo's smile was razor thin. "No. I introduced myself. Made it clear that Mrs. Lane is under new management. They seemed to understand. Rose's breath caught. Under new management? I'm not. I didn't ask you to. You asked me to make you disappear. Ricardo took a turn too fast, throwing Rose against the door. That's what I'm doing. But first, I need to know exactly what kind of man your husband is. I already told you. He's not that. Ricardo cut her off with the casual authority of someone used to controlling conversations. I know what he is to you. I need to know what he is to people like me. People like you, Rose repeated slowly. What does that mean? Ricardo was quiet for a long moment, navigating through streets Rose didn't recognize. The rain had transformed Manhattan into something alien, all reflected light and dark water, familiar landmarks rendered strange. Finally, he said, It means I'm the kind of man your husband does business with, the kind he thinks he's clever enough to use, the kind who keeps very detailed records of people who owe him money, favors, or blood. The words settled into Rose's chest like stones. She couldn't make herself say it. Couldn't make the word real. I'm a lot of things, Ricardo said. Right now, I'm the only thing standing between you and a man who will spend every resource he has finding you. So I'll ask you again. Does your husband just hit you? Or is there more I need to know? Rose closed her eyes. 3 years of silence pressed against her throat. 3 years of pretending, of making excuses, of believing that if she just tried harder, loved better, spoke softer, Evan would become the man he'd promised to be. But that man had never existed. He has meetings, she said finally. Men who come to the apartment after midnight. They don't use names, just initials. Evan keeps files in his study. Locked. He thinks I don't know the combination, but I've watched him open it enough times. Ricardo's eyes sharpened. What kind of files? Accounts. Transfers. Companies that don't seem to exist when I try to search for them online. Rose opened her eyes, met Ricardo's gaze in the mirror. Money that moves in circles. Lots of money. And he's always on the phone with someone he calls the broker. Someone who makes him nervous. The broker, Ricardo repeated, and something dangerous flickered across his face. Did you ever hear a real name? No. But, Rose hesitated. Evan's scared of him. Whoever he is. I can tell. My husband doesn't get scared easily. But this person. Evan won't even take those calls with me in the room. Ricardo pulled into an underground parking garage Rose didn't recognize. The descent felt endless. 1 level, 2, 3, down into the belly of a building that looked abandoned from the street. Where are we? Rose asked, alarm spiking through her exhaustion. Somewhere your husband can't follow. Ricardo parked in a spot near a steel elevator door. Killed the engine. Turned to face her fully, one arm draped over the steering wheel. I'm going to give you a choice, Rose. And I need you to understand what you're choosing. Rose's heart hammered against her ribs. What choice? I can put you in a hotel, give you money, get you on a plane to anywhere you want to go. You can disappear, and Evan Lane will never find you. I'll make sure of it. Ricardo's eyes never left hers. Or you can come with me. Let me use what you know about your husband. Help me take apart whatever he's built with people like the broker. But if you do that, if you choose that, there's no going back to the woman you were. I don't want to go back. The words came out before Rose could stop them. Fierce. Certain. Ricardo studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp and final. Good, he said, and opened his door. Because the woman you were would never survive what comes next. He stepped out into the garage's fluorescent lighting, leaving Rose alone with a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. She could run, disappear into a life built on hiding. Or she could walk through that elevator door with a man whose name she'd learned less than an hour ago, and burn down everything Evan Lane had built. Rose looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror, saw the bruise on her jaw, the mascara-stained tracks down her cheeks, the woman who'd climbed out a window rather than spend another night in a cage. She opened the door and followed Ricardo into the dark. The elevator didn't have buttons. Rose stared at the blank steel panel where numbers should have been, her wet dress clinging to her skin, leaving puddles on the pristine floor. Ricardo stood beside her, close enough that she could see water dripping from his hair onto his collar, but far enough that they weren't touching. He pressed his palm against a black glass panel she hadn't noticed. Something beeped. The elevator lurched upward. Where are we going? Rose asked, hating how small her voice sounded in the confined space. Somewhere safe. That's not an answer. Ricardo's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. It's the only answer you're getting tonight. The elevator climbed for what felt like forever. Rose counted floors by the subtle changes in air pressure. the way her ears popped at intervals. 20 floors, 30. More. When the doors finally opened, she stepped into a world that made Evan's penthouse look like a hotel room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan like a kingdom laid out for conquest. The rain streaked down the glass in sheets, transforming the city into an impressionist painting of light and shadow. The space itself was vast, all dark wood and leather, steel and stone, minimalist in a way that screamed wealth so profound it didn't need to announce itself. But it was the silence that struck Rose first. Complete, absolute, like the world outside had ceased to exist. Top floor, Ricardo said, shrugging out of his wet jacket. Underneath, his shirt clung to his frame, revealing more tattoos snaking across his shoulders. 42 stories. Reinforced walls. Security system designed by someone who used to break into embassies for a living. Rose turned slowly, taking it in. "This is your home?" One of them. Of course it was. Ricardo draped his jacket over a chair and moved to a bar that probably cost more than Rose's college education. He poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal tumbler, then paused, glancing back at her. "You drink whiskey?" Rose almost laughed. "Almost. I don't know anymore." He poured a second glass anyway, and crossed the space to hand it to her. Their fingers brushed. His hands were warm despite the rain, rough with calluses she couldn't identify. She took the glass but didn't drink. "Why are you helping me?" The question had been building since the moment he'd turned the car around. Since he'd locked the doors and asked who did this to you, like he actually cared about the answer. Ricardo studied her over the rim of his glass. "Because men like your husband think they're untouchable. They think money and connections make them safe." He took a slow sip. "I enjoy proving them wrong. That's not a reason. That's revenge." "Maybe." Ricardo moved to the windows, standing with his back to the city like he owned it. "Or maybe I just don't like bullies." Rose wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the man who'd brought her here had motivations beyond whatever business dealings connected him to Evan. But 3 years of marriage had taught her that men always wanted something. "What do you want from me?" "Right now?" Ricardo set his glass down on a side table. "I want you to take a shower. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we'll talk about what your husband's been doing and who he's been doing it with. And if I don't want to tell you, then you don't." Ricardo's eyes locked onto hers. "But you came this far, Rose. Don't stop now because you're scared of where it leads." The bedroom Ricardo showed her to was bigger than her first apartment. A king bed dominated the space, made up in dark gray linens that looked untouched. Another wall of windows. A bathroom visible through an open door that promised hot water and isolation. "Everything you need should be in there," Ricardo said from the doorway. "Clothes in the closet might fit. If they don't, I'll have something sent over in the morning." Rose turned to ask whose clothes they were, but Ricardo was already pulling the door closed. "The door doesn't lock," he said before it shut completely. "But neither does mine. You're not a prisoner here, Rose. You can leave whenever you want." The door clicked shut. Rose stood frozen in the center of the room, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. Then she walked to the door and tested the handle. It opened easily. She closed it again and pressed her forehead against the wood, trembling. "You're not a prisoner." But she'd lived in a penthouse before, one with doors that locked from the outside and windows that didn't open far enough to matter. She'd had everything a woman could want: designer clothes, expensive jewelry, a husband who looked perfect on paper, and she'd been suffocating. This place, Ricardo's space, with its unlocked doors and brutal honesty, felt more like freedom than anything she'd known in years, and that terrified her more than anything else. Rose lasted 15 minutes before the shaking started. She made it through the shower, standing under water hot enough to burn, washing away mascara and rain and 3 years of pretending. She made it into the clothes she found in the closet: soft cotton pants, and a t-shirt that smelled like expensive detergent, and something darker underneath. Cedar, maybe. Smoke. But when she sat on the edge of the bed, alone in the silence, her body finally acknowledged what her mind had been refusing. She'd left. She'd actually left Evan, and there was no going back. The sobs came without warning, tearing from her chest like they'd been locked away for years. Rose pressed a pillow to her face to muffle the sound, her whole body curling around the grief and relief and terror of it all. She didn't hear the door open. Didn't realize Ricardo was there until his voice cut through the darkness. "Breathe." Rose's head snapped up. He stood in the doorway, still wearing the damp shirt and pants from earlier, backlit by the hallway light. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I didn't mean to." "You're allowed to break," Ricardo said quietly. "That's what this place is for." He didn't come closer. Didn't try to touch her or offer empty comfort. He just stood there, solid and real, until Rose's breathing evened out enough for her to speak. Does it get easier? Running? Ricardo leaned against the doorframe. No. But standing still gets harder. Rose pulled the pillow tighter against her chest. I don't know how to do this. Yes, you do. Ricardo's eyes found hers across the darkness. You climbed out a window and got into a stranger's car. You gave me his address. You followed me here. His voice softened, just slightly. You already know how to survive, Rose. Now you just need to learn how to fight back. I don't know if I can. You will. It wasn't a comfort. It was a promise. And somehow, that made all the difference. Ricardo pulled the door closed, leaving Rose alone in the dark with the city lights and her thoughts, and the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, she was done being afraid. Rose woke to sunlight slicing through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. For 3 disorienting seconds, she forgot where she was, reached automatically for the side of the bed where Evan should have been. Her body trained by years of careful morning rituals designed to gauge his mood before he was fully awake. Her hand found empty space. Memory crashed back. The rain, the car, Ricardo's eyes in the rearview mirror. Take me to him. Rose sat up slowly, her ribs protesting the movement. The bruise on her jaw throbbed in time with her heartbeat. She looked down at herself, oversized t-shirt, borrowed clothes, no wedding ring. She'd taken it off in the shower last night and left it on the bathroom counter like a piece of evidence. Voices drifted from somewhere in the penthouse. Male, low, speaking in rapid Spanish. Rose found her feet and moved toward the bedroom door, opening it a crack. The apartment looked different in daylight. Less like a fortress, more like a machine built for efficiency. Everything in its place. Nothing soft except the leather furniture. Ricardo stood in the kitchen, if you could call the stretch of black marble and steel a kitchen, holding a phone to his ear. He'd changed into fresh clothes, dark jeans, a black Henley that did nothing to hide the tattoos or the weapon holstered at his hip. Rose's breath caught at the sight of the gun. She'd known logically what Ricardo was, but seeing the proof casual, unconcealed, made it real in a way last night's adrenaline had blurred. He caught her staring and ended the call without saying goodbye. Coffee? He asked, like having a strange woman in his home was completely normal. Rose stepped into the main room, hyper-aware of how exposed she felt in borrowed clothes. Please. Ricardo poured from a French press into a mug and slid it across the counter. Black. No sugar offered. Rose took it and wrapped both hands around the warmth. What time is it? Just past 9. Ricardo leaned against the counter, studying her. How's your face? Rose touched the bruise automatically, wincing. Fine. Liar. The word was said without judgment, just fact. Ricardo moved to a drawer and pulled out a first aid kit that looked military grade. He set it on the counter between them. Ice would have been better last night, but this will help with the swelling. Rose stared at the medical supplies. You do this often? Help women escape? No. Ricardo met her eyes. I help people who have information I need. Usually they're less complicated. So I'm complicated. You're married to Evan Lane. Ricardo's smile was knife-sharp. That makes you priceless. The word landed like a blow. Rose set down her coffee carefully, hands shaking. I didn't come here to be used. Everyone gets used, Rose. The only question is whether you get something out of it. Ricardo pushed the first aid kit toward her. I'm offering you a trade. What you know about your husband's business dealings for my protection and his destruction. That's more than fair. Fair, Rose repeated, something bitter rising in her throat. Nothing about this is fair. No, Ricardo agreed. But it's honest, which is more than Evan Lane ever gave you. Rose wanted to argue, wanted to grab her things except she had no things and walk out. But the truth was a weight in her chest. She had nowhere to go. No money of her own. No friends who weren't really Evan's friends. No family who would understand why she'd stayed as long as she had. She had nothing except what she knew, and what she knew could hurt Evan. What do you want to know? She asked quietly. Ricardo led her to a room she hadn't seen last night, an office that looked like it belonged to someone who fought wars on paper. 3 monitors glowed on a massive desk. Files were stacked with military precision. A map of Manhattan covered one wall, marked with pins and notes in handwriting too small for Rose to read from the doorway, but it was the 4th wall that made her stop breathing. Photographs. Dozens of them. Surveillance shots of men in expensive suits, shaking hands outside restaurants, getting into cars, entering buildings, and in the center, larger than the rest, Evan. Her husband's face stared back at her from multiple angles, multiple locations. Evan at a restaurant she recognized. Evan entering a building in Midtown. Evan talking to a man whose face had been circled in red marker. "How long have you been watching him?" Rose whispered. 6 months. Ricardo moved to stand beside her, looking at the wall like it was a puzzle he was solving. "Your husband is very good at appearing legitimate. Corporate lawyer, clean record, charitable donations. But he's washing money for 3 separate organizations that would kill each other if they knew he was playing all sides." Ricardo tapped a photo of Evan with the red-circled man. "This is Dmitry Kozlov, Russian. Moves weapons through port shipping. Pays Evan 20% to make the paperwork disappear." Rose's stomach turned. "I don't. Evan never told me." "Of course not." Ricardo moved to another cluster of photos. "This is James Park, Korean syndicate, tech fraud. Also pays your husband to launder funds through shell companies." He pointed to a third set. "And this is why I'm interested. The broker." The photo showed Evan standing outside a cafe, talking to someone whose face was turned away from the camera. "I don't have a name yet," Ricardo continued. "But whoever the broker is, he's the one pulling strings. Your husband reports to him, takes orders, gets scared when he calls." Rose moved closer to the wall, studying her husband's face in each photo. He looked the same as always. Confident, controlled, perfect. She'd never seen the monster behind the mask until it was too late. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Ricardo turned to look at her. Everything. His schedule, his contacts, the files in his study, passwords, patterns, every detail you remember, no matter how small. "And then what?" "Then I take him apart." Ricardo's voice was cold, final. "I freeze his accounts, turn his allies, make him toxic to everyone he's been using. By the time I'm done, Evan Lane won't have money, protection, or a reputation worth saving." Rose should have felt guilty, should have hesitated. Instead, she felt something sharp and fierce unfurling in her chest. "His study password is our wedding anniversary," she said. "But he uses the European date format. Day, month, year. He thinks I don't know, but I watched him type it once when he was drunk." Ricardo's smile was dangerous and approving. "What else?" Rose pulled out a chair and sat down, staring at the wall of her husband's secret life. "He has meetings every Thursday at a restaurant called Benedetto's. Always the same table. Always pays in cash." She paused, remembering. "And he keeps a second phone in a false bottom in his briefcase. The one in his study closet, not the one he carries." Ricardo pulled out his own phone and started typing notes. "The broker calls him on Sundays at exactly 10 p.m. Rose continued, the words flowing easier now. "Evan takes it in his study with the door locked. After those calls, he drinks. A lot. What else scares him?" Rose closed her eyes, remembering every moment she'd seen Evan's mask slip. Every time fear had cracked through the control. "He's afraid of losing everything," she said finally. "Not just money. His reputation. His name. He told me once that image is the only thing that matters, that without it, he's nothing." When Rose opened her eyes, Ricardo was watching her with something that might have been respect. "Then that's what we take first," he said. Rose spent 3 days learning the geography of Ricardo's penthouse, the kitchen where he made coffee every morning at exactly 6 a.m., moving through the space with the efficiency of someone who'd lived alone for a long time. The office where she'd spent hours going through Evan's entire life, translating 3 years of careful observation into information Ricardo could weaponize. The living room where she'd watch the city wake up each morning, counting the ways her old life was dissolving. But it was the things she didn't find that surprised her most. No locked doors except the elevator access. No cameras inside the apartment. No guards watching her every move. Ricardo had meant it when he said she wasn't a prisoner. The realization was more disorienting than captivity would have been. On the 4th morning, Rose woke to silence. She'd grown accustomed to the sound of Ricardo's voice drifting through the penthouse phone calls in Spanish, instructions delivered in that calm, controlled tone that made men twice his size follow orders without question. But today, nothing. Rose pulled on one of the oversized sweaters she'd found in the closet, women's clothes that fit well enough to make her wonder who they'd belonged to, and padded barefoot into the main room. Ricardo sat at the dining table, laptop open, 3 phones arranged in front of him like chess pieces. He looked up when she entered, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked tired. "Coffee's fresh," he said, returning his attention to the screen. Rose poured herself a cup and stood awkwardly near the counter, unsure of the rules here. Was she supposed to join him? Give him space? Pretend this arrangement was normal? "Sit," Ricardo said without looking up. "You're making me nervous." Rose almost smiled. The idea that she could make a man like Ricardo nervous seemed impossible. But she took a seat across from him anyway, cradling her coffee. "Did something happen?" she asked. "Your husband filed a missing persons report." Rose's hands tightened around the mug. "When?" "Yesterday morning." "Had his lawyer call it in?" Ricardo's eyes stayed on his screen, scanning whatever information he was reading. "Police did a welfare check at the apartment, found no signs of forced entry or struggle. They're calling it a voluntary disappearance. That's good, right?" "For now." Ricardo finally looked at her. "But Evan's making noise. Calling your friends the ones he let you have. Posting on social media about being worried, playing the concerned husband." Rose felt something cold slide down her spine. "He's looking for me." "Of course he is. You're his property." Ricardo said it matter-of-factly, like he was stating weather conditions. "Men like Evan don't lose things gracefully. I'm not a thing." "I know that." Ricardo leaned back in his chair, studying her. "But he doesn't, which makes him predictable. Predictable men make mistakes." Rose took a slow sip of coffee, trying to calm the panic building in her chest. "What kind of mistakes?" "The kind where they expose themselves trying to find what they've lost." Ricardo's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and silenced it. "He's already called in favors with 2 private investigators and a city councilman who owes him money. He's desperate." "Good," Rose said, surprised by the venom in her own voice. Ricardo's eyebrow lifted slightly. "Approval, maybe, or interest. You're learning." "Learning what?" "That anger is more useful than fear." The first time Rose saw Ricardo's control slip was over something absurdly small. She'd been working in the office, going through documents Ricardo had acquired. She didn't ask how from Evan's law firm. Partnership agreements, client lists, financial statements that made her head spin. She needed a pen. Saw one on Ricardo's desk. Reached for it. Ricardo's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. Not hard, not painful, but fast enough to make Rose gasp, her whole body going rigid with instinctive terror. They froze like that. Ricardo's hand around her wrist. Rose's breath stopped in her throat. The moment stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. Then Ricardo released her like she'd burned him. "I'm sorry," he said immediately, stepping back. "I didn't mean to." But Rose had already flinched away, her back against the wall, heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Ricardo held up both hands, palms out, unthreatening. "Rose, look at me." She couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the sensation of a man's hand on her wrist, and every time Evan had grabbed her just like that before. "Rose," Ricardo's voice was different now, softer. "You're safe. I'm not going to hurt you. I need you to breathe." The words filtered through slowly. Rose forced herself to look at him. Ricardo hadn't moved, still had his hands up, was watching her like she was a wounded animal that might bolt. "I don't grab without warning," he said quietly. "That was instinct. It won't happen again." Rose's breathing slowly steadied. Why did you—" "That's not a pen. It's a weapon." Ricardo gestured to the sleek metal object she'd almost picked up. "Stabbing end. Triggers a toxin. Would have put you in a coma for about 6 hours." Rose stared at the innocent-looking pen. "You keep poison on your desk?" "I keep a lot of things in places people don't expect." Ricardo lowered his hands slowly. "Are you okay?" No, she wasn't okay. She was standing in a Mafia boss's office, shaking because he'd touched her wrist, learning that casual objects were weapons, realizing she'd married one monster and put her trust in another. But the difference was, Ricardo had stopped, had apologized, had asked if she was okay. "I'm fine," Rose lied. Ricardo studied her for a long moment. "You flinch every time someone moves too fast near you. Every time a door closes. Every time I raise my voice, even when I'm not talking to you. So I need you to know something." Ricardo moved to the desk and very deliberately picked up the pen weapon, holding it where she could see it. "I will never put my hands on you without permission. I will never lock you in. I will never hurt you." He paused. "But I will raise my voice. I will move fast. I will do things that might scare you. Not because of you, because of what I am. And what are you?" Ricardo's smile was grim. "The man who kills people like your husband." The admission should have terrified her. Instead, it steadied something in Rose's chest. "Can you teach me?" she asked suddenly. Ricardo blinked. "Teach you what?" "To fight back." Rose pushed off the wall, standing straighter. "To defend myself. To not flinch every time someone gets close." Rose, you said I'm learning that anger is more useful than fear. So teach me. She met his eyes. I don't want to be afraid anymore. Ricardo studied her like he was seeing her for the first time. Then, slowly, he nodded. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Wear something you can move in. That night, Rose woke to shouting, not in the penthouse outside it. Male voices, angry, echoing up from the street 42 floors below. She got out of bed and moved to the window, looking down at the city lights. Saw Ricardo on the balcony. He stood with his back to her, phone pressed to his ear, his other hand gripping the railing hard enough that his knuckles showed white even from here. Rose couldn't hear the words, but she heard the tone fury, cold and controlled, the kind that promised consequences. When he finally lowered the phone, he stayed there, alone, staring at the city like he was calculating how to burn it down. Rose watched him for a long time. This man who'd offered her protection without asking for anything except information, who'd apologized for grabbing her wrist, who kept weapons disguised as pens and made coffee every morning at 6 a.m. She didn't know what he was fighting, but she was beginning to understand what he was fighting for, and that realization that maybe Ricardo Ortiz wasn't just using her was more dangerous than anything else that had happened since she'd gotten into the wrong car. Rose learned to fight at 6 a.m. in a private gym 2 floors below the penthouse. Ricardo taught her without touching her at first. Balance first, he said, demonstrating a stance. Power comes from your legs, not your arms. Rose mimicked his position, feeling ridiculous in borrowed workout clothes that hung too loose on her frame. Lower, Ricardo instructed. You're too high. Someone pushes you. You'll fall. She adjusted. Her thighs burned immediately. Good. Now stay there for 3 minutes. 3. I've been stabbed 4 times and shot twice, Ricardo said conversationally. If I can stand through that, you can hold a squat for 3 minutes. Rose held it for 2 before her legs gave out. Ricardo didn't comment. Just said, again. They'd been doing this for 5 days when everything changed. Rose was in the kitchen, attempting to make eggs that didn't taste like rubber, when Ricardo's phone rang. Not the burner phones he used for business. His personal cell. She watched him glance at the screen, his jaw tightening in a way she'd learned meant trouble. Stay inside today, he said, answering the call and walking toward his office. Don't go near the windows. Rose turned off the stove. Why? What's happening? But Ricardo had already disappeared, his voice dropping to that low, dangerous register that made people on the other end of the line comply without question. Rose stood frozen in the kitchen, holding a spatula, her heart rate spiking for reasons she couldn't name. Something was wrong. She felt it in the air, that electric charge before a storm breaks. Ricardo emerged from his office 20 minutes later, already wearing his shoulder holster, checking the magazine on a gun Rose had never seen before. Get dressed, he said. Something nice. We're leaving in 30 minutes. Leaving? You just said. Plans changed. Ricardo's eyes met hers, and Rose saw something she hadn't seen before. Calculation with her as the variable. People know you're here. Rose's blood went cold. Evan? Not Evan. Ricardo holstered the weapon and moved to the windows, looking down at the street like he was reading a battlefield. But people who work in the same circles. Word travels fast when someone like me takes an interest in someone's wife. An interest, Rose repeated numbly. You've been here over a week. My people have been asking questions about Evan Lane. His business partners are getting nervous. Ricardo turned back to her. Nervous people talk, and now you're a name people know. Rose felt the room tilting. What does that mean? It means you're either leverage or a liability, depending on who's asking. Ricardo crossed to her, stopping just outside her personal space. So I'm going to make something very clear to everyone who might be considering either option. What? That you're mine. The word hung between them like a blade. Rose's breath caught. I'm not. I know what you are. Ricardo's voice was steady, certain, but they don't. So today, you're going to stand next to me in a room full of people who kill for a living, and you're going to let them believe that touching you means starting a war with me. Rose stared at him. You want me to pretend? I want you to survive. Ricardo's eyes were hard. Everything else is negotiable. The dress was waiting on her bed when Rose returned to her room. Deep burgundy, silk, elegant in a way that felt like armor. She put it on with shaking hands, realizing only as she zipped it up that it fit perfectly, like it had been made for her, or chosen for her. When she emerged, Ricardo was waiting by the elevator, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her college tuition. All black, no tie. The tattoos on his neck stark against his collar. He looked at her once, head to toe, his expression unreadable. "You'll need these," he said, holding out a small box. Inside, diamond earrings that caught the light like captured stars. "Ricardo, I can't." "Yes, you can." He took one earring and held it up. "May I?" The question made Rose's throat tight. "May I?" Not an order. Not an assumption. She nodded. Ricardo fastened the earrings with surprising gentleness, his tattooed fingers careful against her skin. When he finished, he stepped back, studying the effect. "Perfect," he said. Then quieter. "You look like you belong here." Rose didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know if it was a compliment or a warning. The car that picked them up wasn't Ricardo's. This one had a driver and bulletproof windows that made the city look like it was underwater. 2 additional vehicles followed them. Security, Rose realized. An entire convoy for a lunch meeting. "Where are we going?" she asked as Manhattan blurred past. "Benedetto's." Rose's head snapped toward him. "That's where Evan—" "I know." Ricardo's smile was cold. "That's the point." Benedetto's was exactly as Rose remembered it. Old money and older secrets, dim lighting and waiters who moved like shadows. Evan had brought her here twice. Both times to meet clients whose names she was told to forget. Now she walked through the door on Ricardo Ortiz's arm, and the entire restaurant went quiet. Heads turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Someone dropped silverware. Ricardo guided her through the room, with a hand on the small of her backlight, protective, unmistakably possessive. His people flanked them. 3 men in suits that didn't quite hide their weapons. They stopped at a table in the center of the room, the same table where Evan always sat. "Sit," Ricardo said quietly, pulling out her chair. Rose sat because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. Ricardo took the seat across from her, positioning himself so he could see the entire restaurant. His men took up positions at nearby tables, creating a perimeter. A waiter appeared, nervous. "Mr. Ortiz, welcome. Your usual?" "2." Ricardo's eyes never left the room. "And tell everyone watching that Mrs. Lane is under my protection now. Anyone who touches her answers to me." The waiter paled. "Of course, sir. Right away." When he left, Rose leaned forward. Everyone's staring. "Good." Ricardo finally looked at her. "Let them stare. Let them report back to whoever's paying them to pay attention. By tonight, every person in this city who matters will know you're not just some woman I'm hiding. You're a woman I'm claiming." "Claiming," Rose whispered. "Like property. Like a line that can't be crossed." Ricardo's voice dropped. "I know you hate this. I know it feels like trading one cage for another. But this is how you stay alive, Rose. This is how we make you untouchable." Rose's hands twisted in her lap under the table. "And what happens when they realize I'm not actually yours? When this is over and I'm just— You think this is temporary?" The question stopped Rose cold. Ricardo leaned forward, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You know things that could destroy Evan Lane and everyone connected to him. You think I can just let you walk away when this is finished? You think his business partners will? So, I'm a prisoner after all." "No." Ricardo's eyes were intense. "You're protected. There's a difference." "I don't see one." "You will." Ricardo sat back as the waiter returned with drinks. "Give it time." They were halfway through a meal Rose couldn't taste when a man approached their table. Rose recognized him immediately. Gregory Fisher, one of Evan's partners. She'd met him at a charity gala where he'd stared at her chest the entire conversation. Now he looked terrified. "Mr. Ortiz," Gregory said, careful not to look at Rose. "I didn't know you'd be dining here today. Now you do." Ricardo's voice was ice. "Was there something you needed? I wanted to convey my respect, and to assure you that our mutual business interests remain." "Secure? Good." Ricardo took a slow sip of his drink. "Tell Evan Lane I said hello when you see him next." Gregory's face went white. His eyes finally flicked to Rose, recognition and shock warring in his expression. "Mrs. Lane," he managed. "I hope that is we've all been so worried." "She's fine," Ricardo cut in. "Better than fine. Anything else?" Gregory shook his head and practically fled. Rose watched him go, her hands shaking in her lap. "He'll tell Evan. He'll tell him I was here with you." "Yes," Ricardo agreed. "He will. Evan will. Evan will do nothing." Ricardo's eyes locked onto hers. "Because now everyone knows that getting to you means going through me. And no one in this room is that stupid." Rose wanted to believe him. Wanted to feel safe in the protective circle Ricardo had drawn around her. But all she felt was exposed. like she'd just become the most valuable piece on a board she didn't know how to play. Evan came for her 3 days after Benedetto's. Rose was alone in Ricardo's gym, hitting the practice pad the way he'd taught her: pivot from the hips, drive through with your legs, exhale on impact when Ricardo appeared in the doorway. She knew immediately something had changed. He carried a phone she'd never seen before. His jaw was set in that particular way that meant violence was about to be measured out in careful doses. He called. Ricardo said, "Wants to meet." Rose's fists dropped to her sides. Sweat dripped down her spine. When? 20 minutes. The apartment. Ricardo's eyes were flat, empty. Your apartment. The words hit like a physical blow. Rose hadn't let herself think about that place, the penthouse where she'd spent 3 years walking on glass, learning which floorboards creaked, memorizing Evan's moods by the weight of his footsteps. "I can't go back there." "You're not going back." Ricardo crossed the space between them. "I am." "But you're coming with me." "Why?" Rose's voice cracked. "Why do I need to?" "Because he needs to see that you chose this." Ricardo's tone gentled slightly. "He needs to understand that you're not coming back, that you're not his anymore. And if he doesn't accept that," Ricardo's smile was razor sharp, "then I make him accept it." The ride to Park Avenue was silent. Rose sat in the back seat of Ricardo's car, the same car she'd gotten into 2 weeks ago, terrified and broken, watching the city pass by like she was underwater. Ricardo sat beside her, close enough that his shoulder occasionally brushed hers when the driver took a corner. "You don't have to come inside," he said quietly. "You can wait in the car." Rose shook her head. "I need to see his face." "Why?" "Because I need to know I'm not afraid of him anymore." Ricardo studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp and approving. The car pulled up outside the residences. Rose's hands clenched into fists in her lap, nails digging crescents into her palms. "Ground rules," Ricardo said before they exited. "You stay behind me. You don't speak unless he speaks to you first. If I tell you to leave, you leave. Understood? I'm not a child. You're a woman walking back into the home of a man who hurt you." Ricardo's voice was harder now. "I need to know you'll listen." Rose swallowed. "Okay. Say it. If you tell me to leave, I'll leave." "Good." Ricardo opened his door. "Let's go end this." The elevator ride to the penthouse was the longest 42 seconds of Rose's life. She watched the numbers climb, each floor bringing her closer to a confrontation she'd been running from since she'd climbed out that bathroom window. Ricardo stood beside her, perfectly still, but she could feel the tension radiating from him like heat. 2 of his men flanked them, silent, armed. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse, Evan's private entrance, requiring a key card Rose had never been allowed to hold. Ricardo stepped out first. Rose followed, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The apartment looked exactly the same, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, pristine white furniture that Rose had never been allowed to sit on in anything but approved outfits, art worth more than most people's homes, her prison, dressed up as paradise. Evan stood by the windows, silhouetted against the city lights. He turned as they entered, and Rose saw his face properly for the first time in 2 weeks. He looked terrible. Unshaven, rumpled shirt, dark circles under eyes that had always been so carefully maintained. But it was the rage burning in those eyes that made Rose take an instinctive step back. Ricardo's hand caught her elbow. Steadying. Protective. "Rose," Evan said, his voice cracking on her name. "Thank God. I've been so worried." "Don't." Ricardo's single word cut through the space like a blade. "We both know that's not why we're here." Evan's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of pure hatred directed at Ricardo, before sliding back into concerned husband mode. "I don't know what you've told her, Ortiz, but my wife isn't your wife anymore." The words hung in the air like smoke. Evan's jaw clenched. "Rose, come here." It wasn't a request. It was the tone he'd used 1,000 times, the one that meant obey or face consequences later. Rose's body started to move automatically, 3 years of conditioning pulling her toward compliance. Ricardo's hand on her elbow tightened slightly, reminding her she had a choice. Rose stopped, lifted her chin. "No." Evan blinked like she'd slapped him. "What did you say?" "I said no." Rose's voice was steadier now. "I'm not coming back, Evan. You're not thinking clearly." Evan took a step toward them. Ricardo shifted, placing himself directly between Evan and Rose. Evan stopped. "Rose, this man, do you have any idea what he is? What he does?" "Yes," Rose said. "I know exactly what he is. And he's never once locked me in a room, never raised a hand to me, never made me afraid to breathe wrong. Evan's face flushed. Everything I did was to protect you, to give you the life you deserved. You broke her ribs. Ricardo's voice was conversational, almost pleasant. May 16th. She told the hospital she fell down the stairs. Rose felt the blood drain from her face. She'd never told Ricardo that. Never mentioned the hospital visit or the lie she'd told the doctors. Evan had gone very still. How do you... I know everything about you, Lane. Ricardo pulled a phone from his pocket and held it up. On the screen, medical records. Police reports Rose had never filed, but someone had documented. Photos of bruises she didn't remember being taken. I know about the accounts in the Caymans, the shell companies in Delaware, the money you wash for Kozlov and Park. I know about the broker and the calls you take every Sunday at 10 p.m. Ricardo's smile was cold. I know you're not a lawyer. You're a middleman who got too comfortable playing three sides against each other. Evan's face had gone gray. You can't. I have people. Had people. Ricardo pocketed the phone. Past tense. You see, Lane, while you were busy looking for your wife, I was busy making sure no one wanted to find her with you. Kozlov thinks you're FBI. Park thinks you've been skimming. And the broker? Ricardo's smile widened. Well, let's just say he's very interested in why you've suddenly become a liability. You're lying. But Evan's voice shook. Am I? Ricardo gestured to the windows. Check your accounts. Call your partners. Go ahead. We'll wait. Evan pulled out his phone with trembling hands. Rose watched as he made a call, watched his face crumble as whoever answered apparently confirmed what Ricardo had said. What did you do? Evan whispered. I told the truth. Ricardo's voice was merciless. Something you should have tried 3 years ago. Evan's eyes swung to Rose. You did this. You told him. She told me what a coward looks like when he's about to lose everything. Ricardo's hand moved to his hip, where Rose knew his weapon was holstered. Now you're going to listen very carefully, Lane. Rose is under my protection. That means if you call her, if you look for her, if you even think about her too hard, I will know. And I will make what I've done to your business look gentle. She's my wife. She's a woman who climbed out a bathroom window to escape you. Ricardo took a single step forward. You don't get to touch her anymore. You don't get to find her. You don't get to have an opinion about what she does or who she does it with. Evan's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Rose thought he might actually try to fight Ricardo. Then Ricardo's men stepped forward from where they'd been waiting by the elevator. The fight drained out of Evan like air from a punctured balloon. This isn't over, Evan said, but his voice was hollow. Yes, Ricardo replied. It is. They were back in the elevator before Rose started shaking. Ricardo's arm came around her shoulders the first time he'd touched her like that, steadying her as the elevator descended. Breathe, he said quietly. You did good. I didn't do anything. I just stood there. You stood there and said no. Ricardo's voice was fierce. That's everything. Rose leaned into him without thinking, her forehead pressing against his shoulder. He smelled like expensive cologne, and something darker gunpowder, maybe, or violence held in check. Is it really over? She whispered. Ricardo's arm tightened around her. Yes, he lied, because they both knew Evan Lane wasn't the type to accept losing, and neither was the broker. Rose didn't sleep that night. She lay in the guest bedroom, though, after 2 weeks. It felt less like a guest room and more like the only safe place she'd ever known, staring at the ceiling, replaying Evan's face when Ricardo had dismantled his entire world with a few sentences, the broken look in his eyes. The way his hands had trembled, the fear. She should have felt guilty. Should have felt something other than this hollow satisfaction burning in her chest, but all she felt was free. Around 3 a.m., she gave up on sleep and padded into the main room. The city glowed beyond the windows, never sleeping, never stopping. Rose pressed her forehead against the cool glass and closed her eyes. Can't sleep? She turned to find Ricardo standing in the hallway, wearing only sleep pants, his tattooed torso bare in the ambient light. Rose had seen him in workout clothes, in suits, in the controlled armor he wore like a second skin. But this casual, unguarded, felt dangerously intimate. I keep thinking about his face, Rose admitted. When you told him everything, he looked small. He is small. Ricardo moved to the kitchen, pulling down 2 glasses. Men like Evan only look powerful because they choose victims who can't fight back. He poured whiskey into both glasses and crossed to hand her one. You saw him clearly today. That's all. Rose took the glass but didn't drink. What happens now? Now? Ricardo leaned against the window beside her. close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Now you decide what you want." "What I want," Rose repeated slowly. "I don't understand. You wanted to escape. You did. You wanted him to understand you weren't coming back. He does." Ricardo's dark eyes found hers. "So what do you want next, Rose? A new identity? Money? A flight to somewhere he'll never find you?" The offer should have been tempting. Should have been everything she dreamed about during those 3 years of marriage. But the thought of leaving, of walking away from this penthouse, from Ricardo's brutal honesty, from the first place she'd felt like she could breathe, made her chest tight. "I don't know," she whispered. "Yes, you do." Ricardo's voice was quiet. "Certain. You're just afraid to say it." Rose's hands tightened around her glass. "I don't want to run anymore." "Then don't. But I can't stay here forever. I can't just—" Rose stopped, the words tangling in her throat. "I'm not yours, Ricardo. I know what we showed everyone at Benedetto's, but that was theater, protection. It wasn't real. Wasn't it?" The question hung between them like a lit match near gasoline. Rose's breath caught. "What are you saying?" Ricardo set down his glass and turned to face her fully. "I'm saying you've been here 2 weeks. I know how you take your coffee. I know you can't sleep past 6 a.m., even when you're exhausted. I know you reorganized my kitchen because you needed something to control." He took a step closer. "I know you're terrified of being trapped, but you're more terrified of being alone. And I know that every time I leave this apartment, you watch the door until I come back." Rose felt exposed, seen in a way that should have been uncomfortable but instead felt like relief. "That doesn't mean—" "I'm not asking you to belong to me, Rose." Ricardo's voice was rougher now. "I'm asking what you want. No games, no theater, just truth." Rose stared at him. This man who'd turned her husband's life to ash, who killed people for a living, who made coffee every morning and taught her to fight and never once made her feel small. "I want to stay," she said finally. "Not because I'm afraid. Not because I have nowhere else to go. I want to stay because—" She swallowed hard. "Because when I'm with you, I don't feel like I'm disappearing." Ricardo's expression shifted, something vulnerable breaking through that controlled mask. "Rose, but I need to know this is real," she continued, her voice steadier now. "I need to know I'm not just useful to you. That when Evan's completely destroyed, and his connections are severed, and I'm not valuable anymore, you won't." Her voice cracked. "I need to know I matter." "You think you don't matter?" Ricardo's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing the bruise that had finally started to fade. "You think I bring women to my home? Let them see where I sleep? Teach them how I think?" His eyes were intense. "I've been protecting people for 20 years, Rose. Never once brought them here. Never once cared if they were okay after the job was finished. Then why? Because you got into my car and trusted me when you had no reason to. Because you're brave enough to stand in a room with your abuser and say no. Because you see exactly what I am and you're still standing here asking if you matter." Ricardo's voice dropped. "You matter more than you should. That's the problem." Rose's heart was pounding so hard she thought Ricardo must be able to hear it. "Why is that a problem?" "Because people I care about become targets." Ricardo's hand dropped from her face. "I've already made you visible. Every enemy I have now knows your name. The broker knows your name. And Evan—" He stopped. "Evan's not done, Rose. He's humiliated, desperate. Men like that do stupid, dangerous things. So what are you saying? That I should leave for my own safety?" "I'm saying you should understand what staying means." Ricardo's eyes were hard. "It means accepting that danger follows me. It means learning to live with guards and locked doors, and the possibility that someone might use you to hurt me. It means—" Rose kissed him. She didn't plan it. Didn't think. Just closed the distance between them and pressed her lips to his, swallowing whatever warning he was about to give. Ricardo went perfectly still, for one horrible second. Rose thought she'd misread everything, thought she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Then his hand came up to tangle in her hair, and he kissed her back. Not gentle, not tentative, like he'd been holding back for weeks and her permission had finally broken something loose. Rose's back hit the window. Ricardo's other hand braced beside her head, caging her in without trapping her. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "That's what I want," Rose said, her voice shaking. "I want to stop being afraid. I want to stop running. I want—" She met his eyes. "I want to stay with you, whatever that means, whatever comes next." Ricardo studied her face like he was memorizing it. "You're sure?" "No." Rose's laugh was breathless. "I'm terrified, but I'm sure I don't want to be anywhere else." Ricardo's smile was slow. Dangerous. Then stay. Just like that? Just like that. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. But Rose, if you stay, you need to understand something. What? I don't share. His voice was low, possessive, and I don't let go of things that matter to me. 3 weeks ago, those words would have terrified her, would have sounded like ownership, control, another cage. But Ricardo had spent 2 weeks showing her the difference between possession and protection, between control and care. Good, Rose whispered. Neither do I. Ricardo kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, like he was learning the shape of her mouth, the taste of her trust. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were black with want, but his voice was controlled. We should stop. Why? Because if we don't, I'm going to carry you to my bedroom, and you've been through hell. You need time. I've had 2 weeks of time. Rose's hands found his chest, feeling his heart hammer beneath her palms. I don't need more time. She looked up at him. I need to feel something other than afraid. Ricardo's jaw tightened. Rose. Please. The word came out broken. I need to choose this. Choose you. Choose something that's mine. For a long moment, Ricardo just looked at her. Then, very deliberately, he stepped back and held out his hand. Your choice, he said quietly. Always your choice. Rose took his hand, and chose. Rose woke to sunlight and the unfamiliar weight of an arm around her waist. For a disoriented moment, panic spiked through her. Another morning, waking up trapped. Another day of performing the role of perfect wife before memory caught up. Ricardo, the window, the kiss, the way he'd carried her to his bedroom and spent hours proving that intimacy didn't have to hurt, that pleasure could exist without fear, that her body was hers to give, not his to take. Rose turned carefully, not wanting to wake him, and found Ricardo already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Hi, she said, suddenly shy in a way that felt absurd considering what they'd done last night. Hi. Ricardo's voice was rough with sleep. His hand came up to brush hair from her face, the gesture achingly gentle. How do you feel? I feel... Rose stopped, searching for the right word. Safe felt too simple. Happy felt too fragile. I feel like myself. Something shifted in Ricardo's expression. Good. They lay there in silence, watching early morning light paint patterns across the ceiling. Rose traced the tattoos on Ricardo's arm, intricate designs she'd never been close enough to study before. A compass, names in script she couldn't read, dates that probably marked violence. Tell me about these, she said quietly. Ricardo was quiet for a long moment. Most people don't ask. I'm not most people. No, Ricardo caught her hand, stilling her exploration. You're not. He brought her fingers to his lips, kissing each knuckle. This one, he indicated the compass, is from my first job. Reminder to always know which way is home. And where's home? Used to be Bogota, then nowhere. Ricardo's eyes found hers. Now I'm not sure. The implication in those words made Rose's chest tight. The names? She asked, redirecting. Brothers. Not by blood. By choice. Ricardo's voice went flat. All dead. I'm sorry. Don't be. They knew what they were choosing. But his jaw was tight. This life doesn't have happy endings, Rose. The men who taught me everything? Gone. The partners I trusted? Betrayed me or got killed. I've been alone for a long time because alone is safer. Then why? Rose stopped, afraid to finish the question. Why you? Ricardo turned to face her fully. Because you got into my car and trusted me when every instinct should have told you to run. Because you're strong enough to survive what broke most people. Because... He stopped. Because I'm tired of being alone. Rose felt tears burning behind her eyes. I don't want to be another name you have to memorize. You won't be. Ricardo's hand cupped her face. I won't let that happen. You can't promise that. No, he admitted. But I can promise I'll burn down anyone who tries. It should have sounded like hyperbole, but Ricardo said it like a fact, like gravity or mathematics, something fundamental and unchangeable. Rose kissed him, slow and deep and grateful for this man who spoke in violence but touched her like she was something precious. When they finally broke apart, Ricardo's phone was buzzing on the nightstand. He ignored it. It buzzed again. You should answer, Rose said. No, Ricardo. Whatever it is can wait. His arms tightened around her. Right now, nothing is more important than this. But the phone kept buzzing. Insistent. Urgent. Finally, with a curse in Spanish, Ricardo reached for it. His expression darkened as he read the screen. "What is it?" Rose asked, sitting up. Ricardo was already out of bed, pulling on clothes with efficient speed. "Evan." Rose's blood went cold. "What about him?" "He's gone to the broker." Ricardo's voice was grim. "Made a deal. Your location for protection. But you said the broker was done with him." "I said the broker thought he was a liability. Desperate men make compelling arguments." Ricardo was holstering weapons now, his entire demeanor shifting from lover to something far more dangerous. "Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." "Ricardo, wait." He crossed back to her, gripping her face between his hands. "Listen to me. The broker doesn't negotiate. He collects. If Evan gave him your name, he's going to want to verify you're real. Verify you're valuable." Ricardo's eyes were intense. "I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Rose's heart was hammering. "Yes." "Good." He kissed her hard and fast. "I'll be back, I promise." Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving Rose alone in the sudden silence. She counted her heartbeats, tried to steady her breathing, told herself that Ricardo had kept her safe for 2 weeks, that he wouldn't fail now, but the fear was back, sharp and familiar, reminding her that safety was always temporary, that men made promises they couldn't keep, that everything good eventually turned to ash. Rose got dressed in clothes that felt like armor, found the knife Ricardo had given her last week during training, tested its weight in her hand. If Evan thought he could trade her like property, he was going to learn exactly how much she'd changed since climbing out that bathroom window. She wasn't running anymore. She was ready to fight. Ricardo returned 4 hours later, covered in someone else's blood. Rose was standing by the window, had been standing there since he left, knife in hand, watching the street below for threats when the elevator doors opened. She spun, weapon raised, before recognizing him. "It's me," Ricardo said, hands up. "Just me." Rose lowered the knife with shaking hands. "Are you hurt?" "No." Ricardo's voice was flat, emotionless, the tone he used when he'd done something he couldn't take back. "But Evan is." Rose's breath caught. "Is he dead?" "No." Ricardo moved to the bar and poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey, drank it in one swallow. "But he won't be making any more deals." "What does that mean?" Ricardo poured another glass. "It means I found him before he could tell the broker where you were. It means he's in a hospital under guard. It means—" He stopped, his back to her. "It means I crossed a line I can't uncross." Rose set down the knife and crossed to him. "What line?" "I told the broker you were under my protection. That taking you meant war with my entire organization." Ricardo's hands clenched on the bar. "I claimed you, not as theater, as mine, officially, publicly." Rose's heart was pounding. And he accepted it. Ricardo finally turned to face her. "But acceptance comes with conditions, rules. You're not just under my protection now, Rose. You're part of my world. That means people know my name, know my face, know I matter to you." Rose stepped closer. "You already told me that." "This is different." Ricardo's eyes were hard. "Before you were insurance. Leverage I was using against Evan. Now you're—" He stopped. "Now you're a target. Anyone who wants to hurt me will come for you first, then teach me to fight better." Ricardo blinked. "What?" "You heard me." Rose lifted her chin. "Teach me. Train me. Make me someone who can protect herself. Because I'm not hiding. I'm not running. And I'm not letting Evan or the broker or anyone else decide what happens to me. Rose, you said I was brave enough to stand in a room with my abuser and say no. Prove you meant it. Stop treating me like I need to be locked away and start treating me like a partner." Ricardo stared at her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he smiled. "You're insane. I learned from the best." Ricardo closed the distance between them, pulling her against him despite the blood on his clothes. "You understand what you're asking? What it means to be part of this world?" "I understand. I've spent my entire life being afraid, being controlled, being someone's property." Rose looked up at him. "With you, I get to choose. Even if that choice is dangerous, even if it's violent, it's mine." Ricardo's expression softened. "You're going to get me killed, probably." Rose's smile was fierce. "But you'll die knowing someone gave a damn." Ricardo laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. Then he kissed her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his entire life. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. Okay. I'll train you. Teach you everything I know. Make you dangerous. Ricardo's eyes were serious. But you have to promise me something. What? Promise me you'll stay alive long enough to regret this decision. Rose's smile was sharp as a blade. Only if you promise the same thing. Deal. They sealed it with another kiss. Deeper. Longer. A promise written in touch and breath and the space between heartbeats. When they finally broke apart, Ricardo's phone was buzzing again. This time he answered it without hesitation, keeping Rose tucked against his side while he spoke in rapid Spanish. She didn't understand all the words, but she caught enough. Guards, surveillance, training schedule, new protocols. Ricardo was restructuring his entire operation around keeping her safe. The thought should have terrified her. Should have felt like another cage being built. Instead, it felt like being seen, valued, chosen. When Ricardo ended the call, he looked down at her. Tomorrow starts early, 6 a.m., full training protocol. I'll be ready. I know you will. Ricardo guided her toward his bedroom, their bedroom now. But tonight, we sleep. Just sleep? Ricardo's smile was wicked. I didn't say that. Later, much later, when they were tangled in sheets and each other, Rose traced patterns on Ricardo's chest and thought about the woman she'd been 2 weeks ago, barefoot, broken, running from a man who'd made her small. She thought about getting into the wrong car, about whispered confessions and locked doors and the moment Ricardo had said, "Take me to him," like it was the most natural thing in the world. She thought about transformation, about violence as liberation, about finding power in the last place she'd expected to look. "What are you thinking?" Ricardo asked, his voice rough with approaching sleep. "I'm thinking I got into the wrong car." Ricardo went still beneath her. "Rose. And I'm thinking it was the best mistake I ever made." She propped herself up to look at him. "Thank you. For what?" "For not taking me away from him." Rose's voice was fierce. "For taking me to him. For showing me I could say no. For," her throat tightened, "for making me feel like I matter." Ricardo's hand came up to cup her face. "You do matter. More than you know. Show me," Rose whispered. So he did. And when dawn broke over Manhattan, Rose Lane, who'd spent 3 years trapped in a gilded cage, who'd climbed out a bathroom window in a designer dress, who'd gotten into a stranger's car and changed her entire life, woke up beside the most dangerous man in the city, and felt, for the first time in her life, completely free. Outside, the city sprawled beneath them like a kingdom. Somewhere in those streets, Evan Lane was learning that money couldn't buy back what he'd destroyed. The broker was learning that some women weren't for sale. And everyone who'd ever underestimated Rose was learning that the quietest victims sometimes made the loudest storms. But inside Ricardo's penthouse, 42 stories above the chaos, Rose and Ricardo built something new from the wreckage of her old life. Not a fairy tale, not a rescue, a choice, dangerous and beautiful and entirely their own. And when Ricardo asked her one more time, his voice soft in the morning light, his arms wrapped around her like a shield against the world, "What do you want, Rose?" she answered without hesitation. "This. I want this." It was enough. It was everything. Thanks for staying with this story right till the final moment. You're the reason these stories come alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to see your thoughts and connect with you down there.